Homeless girl saved a dog from the rain. The next day, the dog's owner, a CEO, knocked on her door. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. It was a cold, rainy evening when Emily, a homeless girl in her 20s, found herself standing at the edge of a desolate street corner. The sound of raindrops hitting the pavement echoed around her as the chill of the night crept deeper into her bones. She had been living on the streets for months, after losing her job and her small apartment due to the pandemic. Life had been hard, and every day felt like a struggle. She wrapped her thin coat tighter around her body, trying to shield herself from the relentless rain, but it was a losing battle. The rain soaked through her clothes, and the streets around her were nearly empty. The distant rumble of thunder made her flinch, and she wondered how much longer she could survive out here in the cold. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she hadn't eaten in hours. She looked down the street, hoping to spot a warm place to get some food, but nothing appeared in sight. Then, through the blur of raindrops, she noticed something unusual. A small dog, drenched from the rain, was standing under a street lamp. The dog was shivering, its fur matted and clinging to its tiny body. Emily's heart clenched at the sight of the helpless creature. Without thinking twice, she rushed toward the dog, her worn shoes splashing in the puddles as she approached. "Hey there, little guy," she whispered softly as she knelt down. The dog looked up at her, its big brown eyes full of fear, but Emily could tell it was grateful. She gently scooped the dog into her arms, feeling the weight of it against her chest. The warmth of the animal's body was a small comfort in the harsh rain. Emily had always loved animals, and though she had little to offer, she couldn't leave this poor dog to suffer alone. "It's okay," she murmured. "I'll take care of you." She tucked the dog under her coat and hurried toward the alley where she had been sleeping. It wasn't much of a shelter, just a corner behind an abandoned building, but it was warm enough for a while. As she settled into her makeshift home, Emily wiped the dog's fur dry with an old towel she had found in a dumpster. The dog curled up beside her, its small body still shivering, but visibly more at ease now. Emily closed her eyes, listening to the sound of the rain outside, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. She had done something good for once. The rain continued to pour through the night, but in the warmth of the alley, Emily and the dog found comfort in each other's company. Little did she know, this small act of kindness would change her life forever. The next morning, as the sun began to break through the clouds, Emily was startled awake by a knock on the cardboard she had used to cover the entrance to her shelter. She quickly stood up, holding the dog protectively in her arms. She peered out cautiously, unsure of who would be visiting her at this early hour. The moment the door cracked open, a tall man in a well-tailored suit stepped forward. His dark hair was slicked back, and his piercing blue eyes looked down at her with an intense, almost familiar gaze. "Excuse me," he said in a smooth, confident voice. "I believe you have my dog." The tall man in the well-tailored suit stood at the entrance, his piercing blue eyes scanning Emily with a mixture of concern and curiosity. She froze, clutching the shivering dog in her arms, unsure of what to do next. "I'm sorry to intrude," the man said, his voice smooth but firm. "I believe you have my dog." Emily blinked, taking a step back. She hadn't expected to see anyone so well-dressed in this alley. Her heart raced, her mind trying to process this new, unexpected situation. "Your dog?" she asked, her voice hesitant, barely a whisper. The man nodded, his eyes flicking down to the small dog she was holding. "Yes, he's mine. His name is Max." Max, the little dog who had found comfort in her arms. Just hours earlier, Emily looked down at the dog, who seemed to be staring up at her with recognition, his tail wagging slightly. She hesitated. I didn't know he belonged to anyone," she said, her words coming out awkwardly. "He was just out in the rain. I couldn't leave him there." The man's gaze softened as he looked at her, his expression shifting from formality to something more genuine. "I understand," he said. "Thank you for taking care of him." He paused, then added, "I'm David Carter." Emily stared at him, her brow furrowed. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. David Carter? She repeated, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Yes, I'm the CEO of Carter Enterprises, he said, as though it should have meant something to her. But Emily didn't care about business titles or corporate empires. She only cared about the dog and about her own life, which seemed far removed from anything David Carter represented. She looked down at the dog again, a sudden rush of guilt flooding her chest. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to take your dog. I couldn't leave him in the rain. David gave her a small smile, the kind of smile that spoke of kindness and understanding. It's okay, he said softly. I'm just glad he's safe now. There was a pause, and for a moment, neither of them knew what to say. Emily shifted uncomfortably, the cold starting to creep back into her bones as she stood there in the alley, still holding Max. David's eyes softened again as he looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. You don't look like you're in a very comfortable situation, he said, his tone shifting slightly, still polite, but with a hint of concern. Emily blinked, surprised by the comment. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply shrugged. I manage, she said, her voice barely audible. David studied her for a moment longer, then took a deep breath. I don't want to intrude, but I can help you, he said. Emily's eyes widened. Help me, she repeated, incredulous. What could someone like him possibly offer her, a girl who had been living on the streets for months? David nodded. Yes, he said, his voice steady. I own a property not far from here. It's a small apartment, but it's clean, safe, and I can offer you a job. It's not much, but it would get you back on your feet. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She didn't know if she should laugh or cry. This was too much, too sudden. She was used to rejection, to the harshness of life on the streets, but this felt like a dream. She looked at David, her mind racing. Why would you do this? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. You don't know me. David shrugged, a small, almost amused smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. I don't need to know you to see that you're a good person. And besides, Max here seems to think you're worth trusting. Emily glanced down at the dog, who was now curled up in her arms, his tail wagging softly. It seemed like he was in agreement. She let out a shaky breath, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Could she really trust this man? Could she accept his offer and change her life? Her instincts told her to be cautious, but the kindness in his eyes, the gentleness in his voice, made her wonder if this could be her chance for a new beginning. After a long pause, Emily finally nodded, her voice soft but resolute. Okay, she said, almost in disbelief at her own words. I'll take the job. David smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Good, he said. Let's get you out of here. As they walked together toward his car, with Max happily trotting along beside them, Emily couldn't help but feel a spark of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. As Emily sat in the passenger seat of David's car, a sense of disbelief lingered in her chest. The soft hum of the engine was the only sound filling the space between them. She hadn't spoken much since agreeing to the job offer. Her mind was still processing everything. The fact that she was in a car that wasn't a broken-down old vehicle, headed toward a life that seemed too good to be true. Max, the dog she had saved from the rain, was curled up on her lap, his soft breathing a small comfort. David kept his eyes on the road, but she could sense the occasional glance in her direction. She wasn't sure how to thank him for the opportunity or how to even begin to explain her uncertainty. When they arrived at the apartment complex, it was far better than anything she had ever imagined. The building was well kept, the lobby bright and welcoming. David led her upstairs to a small, but cozy apartment on the second floor. It had a warm color palette, and there was a faint smell of fresh paint in the air. The living room was modest, but the view from the window was incredible. Emily couldn't believe this was real. This is your place, David said, opening the door and stepping aside to let her in. Emily stepped inside, her heart racing. It's beautiful, she whispered, walking around the space, taking in the simple, clean design. There was a small kitchenette, a bathroom with fresh towels, and a bed with soft white linens. It felt like a home, not a shelter or a temporary stop. She could hardly believe this was happening. David stood in the doorway, watching her. I hope it's okay, he said softly. I know it's not much, but it's a start. Emily turned to him, her eyes filling with gratitude. It's more than enough, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I never thought I'd have a place like this. David smiled, a hint of warmth in his eyes. It's yours, for as long as you need it. There was a long pause as Emily stood there, taking it all in. She had lived on the streets for so long that the idea of stability, of being able to relax without constantly worrying about her next meal or where she would sleep, seemed impossible. But now, standing in this apartment, it was becoming a reality. David broke the silence. There's a job for you at my company, of course, he said. It's not glamorous, but it's a good start. You'll be helping out with office tasks, organizing, and taking care of some small errands. I know you've been through a lot, so don't feel pressured to dive in immediately. Take your time. Emily nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. She had no idea what to say. It wasn't just the job or the apartment. It was the kindness he had shown her, the opportunity to build a life that wasn't defined by struggle. I can't thank you enough, she said quietly. David shook his head. You don't need to thank me. You've already done something amazing by saving Max. You've got a lot of heart, and that's something you can't fake. Emily's heart swelled at his words. She had spent so long feeling invisible, like no one cared about her. But here was a man, a complete stranger, who had seen her worth without needing her to explain herself. That night, as Emily lay in the soft bed, Max curled up beside her, she felt a sense of peace that had eluded her for so long. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in months, she felt safe. She wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear. This was the beginning of something new. She closed her eyes, letting the weight of the day slip away, knowing that tomorrow would be the first day of the rest of her life. Emily had been working at David's company for a week now, and every day felt like a new opportunity. The work wasn't complicated, but it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in a long time. She was organizing files, running small errands, and helping with some of the office tasks that seemed so far removed from her past life on the streets. It felt good to be productive, to have a place to go every day, and to know she was contributing in some way. The office itself was modern, with clean lines and bright windows that overlooked the city below. It wasn't the grandest place she'd ever seen, but it was a world apart from the rundown alley she had called home just a few weeks ago. Every morning, she walked to work with Max by her side, the dog now an inseparable companion. The routine had brought a strange comfort to her life, but there were still moments when the weight of her past threatened to overwhelm her. She would find herself standing in the elevator, staring at her reflection in the polished steel walls, wondering if this was all really happening. Was she truly living this life, or was it just a fleeting dream? One afternoon, as Emily was tidying up the office kitchen, David walked in. He smiled at her as he grabbed a cup of coffee, and for a moment, their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. How's everything going? He asked, his voice casual, but with an undertone of concern. Emily hesitated before answering, not because she didn't want to share, but because she was still adjusting to the fact that someone was actually asking about her well-being. Good, she said softly, wiping down the counter. I'm still getting used to all of this. It's just so different from what I'm used to. David nodded, setting down his coffee cup and leaning against the counter. I know it's a lot, he said, but you're doing great. And it's okay to feel like it's a bit overwhelming at first. You're starting fresh, and that's a big deal. Emily smiled, the warmth in his words reaching her in a way she hadn't expected. She had grown so accustomed to being invisible, to being ignored, that hearing someone acknowledge her efforts made her feel seen for the first time in a long while. Thanks, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm really grateful for this job, for everything. David's expression softened. You don't need to thank me. You're here because you've earned it, Emily. You've got a lot of potential. He paused, as if weighing his next words carefully. And if you ever need anything at all, just let me know. Emily looked at him, unsure how to respond. She wasn't used to kindness, certainly not this kind of genuine, unspoken offer. But there was something in David's eyes that made her feel safe, like she could trust him, even if she didn't fully understand why. I'll keep that in mind, she said, her voice steady now. For the rest of the afternoon, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that things were changing. She had always believed that life was a series of random events, one after the other, with no real meaning. But now, standing here in this office, with David's words echoing in her mind, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could create a new story for herself. After work, Emily walked home with Max by her side, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. As she neared her apartment, she felt a sense of calm that had eluded her for so long. For the first time in what felt like forever, she wasn't thinking about survival. She wasn't worried about where she would sleep or whether she would be able to eat. She was thinking about possibilities. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a future here. The next morning, as Emily was getting ready for work, she glanced at her phone. There was a message from David, inviting her to a company event that evening. She hesitated for a moment. She wasn't sure if she belonged at such an event. The idea of mingling with executives and other professionals felt intimidating, but there was something about it that intrigued her. What if this could be another step forward? What if this was her chance to show everyone, including herself, that she belonged in a world like this? With a deep breath, she decided to go. She wasn't sure what the evening would bring, but she was ready to find out. Emily arrived at the company event feeling nervous, her heart racing as she stepped into the elegantly decorated ballroom. The space was vast, with soft lighting casting a warm glow over the guests who mingled in their formal attire, sipping drinks and exchanging business talk. Emily, in her simple black dress that she had borrowed, felt out of place among the well-dressed professionals. She stood near the entrance for a moment, feeling a wave of uncertainty wash over her. What was she doing here? She was just the girl who had been living on the streets not too long ago. Her thoughts were interrupted as she felt a tap on her shoulder. Turning around, she saw David standing there, a warm smile on his face. "You made it," he said, his voice full of encouragement. Emily gave a small, shy smile. "I almost didn't, but I'm glad I did." David looked her up and down, clearly impressed by how she carried herself. "You look great," he said. Emily felt a blush creep up her neck, her insecurities briefly flaring up. "Thanks," she replied softly, feeling both flattered and out of place. David, sensing her discomfort, led her further into the room. "Come on, let me introduce you to some people." As they walked through the crowd, Emily tried to steady her nerves. It was hard to believe she was standing here, surrounded by successful professionals, when just a few weeks ago, she had been struggling to survive. David introduced her to a few of his colleagues, all of them polite and welcoming. Emily smiled, though she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. She could see the curious glances they exchanged as they sized her up. She wasn't used to this, people actually looking at her, talking to her with respect. It was both overwhelming and exhilarating. After a while, David led her to a quieter corner of the room, away from the crowd. "How are you feeling?" he asked, his voice soft, almost as if he was reading her mind. Emily hesitated before speaking. "It's different. I'm not sure I belong here, David." David gave her a reassuring smile. "You absolutely do. You belong here just as much as anyone else. You've got the heart, the drive, and the courage. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." Emily felt her heart warm at his words. It was something she hadn't heard in a long time, the kind of affirmation that made her believe in herself. For the first time in her life, she wasn't defined by her past. She was standing here, in this moment, as someone with potential, not just someone struggling to survive. As the evening went on, Emily began to relax a little. She found herself laughing at some of the conversations, slowly shedding the layers of self-doubt she had worn for so long. She even found herself talking to a few of the guests, asking questions and sharing her thoughts. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like a start. By the end of the night, Emily realized that this event wasn't just about business connections. It was about her own growth, about stepping out of her comfort zone and into a new life. As she said goodbye to David and walked toward the exit, she couldn't help but smile. For the first time, she felt like she was on the right path, even if she didn't know exactly where it would lead. The future felt uncertain, but it no longer felt as terrifying as it once had. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, and that, in itself, was enough to make her believe that anything was possible. The days following the company event felt like a whirlwind for Emily. Each morning, she woke up in her new apartment, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. The bed was soft, the apartment warm, and most importantly, she had a job to look forward to. But there were still moments when doubt crept in. Her mind would wander to her past, to the streets she used to call home, to the days when survival was her only goal. What if this was all a dream? What if she wasn't truly worthy of the life she was building? But every time she thought about leaving, she would remember the kindness David had shown her, how he had seen something in her that even she hadn't recognized. One morning, as she made her way to work, David called her into his office. She had been organizing some paperwork when his assistant came to get her. "David wants to see you," she said, and Emily's stomach fluttered with uncertainty. She walked down the long hallway to his office, her steps echoing in the quiet building. When she entered, David was standing by the window, looking out over the city. "Come in," he said with a smile, motioning for her to take a seat. Emily sat down, her heart racing. She had no idea what this meeting was about. "How's everything going?" David asked, his voice casual, but there was a note of concern in his eyes. Emily smiled, trying to calm her nerves. "Good. Everything's going well. I'm getting the hang of things." David nodded, but there was something different in his demeanor today. He didn't seem like his usual self-assured self. "I'm glad to hear that," he said, "but there's something I need to talk to you about." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft. David paused for a moment, clearly trying to find the right words. "I've been thinking about how you've been doing here, and I think you deserve more. You have so much potential, Emily, and I want to offer you something bigger, something that could change your future." Emily blinked, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean?" she asked, feeling a rush of excitement mixed with anxiety. David looked at her, his expression serious. "I want you to take on more responsibility. I want you to be part of something important in this company, something that could help others, just like you were helped." Emily's heart raced. "Are you offering me a promotion?" she asked, the words barely leaving her lips. David smiled, his eyes warm. "Yes, I think you'd be a perfect fit for a role that helps people in need. We've been working on a community outreach program, and I think you could lead it." Emily was stunned. She had never imagined that she, a girl who had once been on the streets, could be in a position to lead a program, especially one that aimed to give back to people like her. She stared at David, unsure of how to respond. "But I don't have the experience," she stammered. "I barely know how to run a business." David's smile softened. "You don't need to know everything right away. What you bring to the table is your heart, your compassion, your drive. I know you have it in you." Emily sat back, her mind spinning. This was a huge opportunity. But could she really do it? Could she lead something like that? David seemed to sense her hesitation and stood up, walking over to her. He placed a hand on her shoulder, giving her a reassuring squeeze. "Emily, I've seen what you're capable of, and you don't have to do it alone. We'll support you every step of the way." The words settled over her like a warm blanket, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt the weight of her insecurities lift. She looked up at David, her voice filled with determination. "Okay, I'll do it." David's face lit up. "I knew you would," he said with a proud smile. "We'll start by having a meeting with the team tomorrow. But for now, just know that I'm behind you 100%. As Emily left his office, she felt a surge of excitement and nervousness flood through her. This was the opportunity she had been waiting for. The chance to not only change her life, but to make a difference in the lives of others. It was terrifying, but she was ready to take the leap. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in her life, Emily knew she had the strength to face whatever came her way. Emily spent the next few weeks in a blur of meetings, brainstorming sessions, and preparation for the community outreach program she was now leading. She had never imagined herself in such a position, especially not a few months ago when she had been living on the streets, struggling to get by. Every day, she faced new challenges, but she was determined to rise to the occasion. David had been a constant support, offering guidance when needed and giving her the space to make decisions. Slowly, the team began to see her as more than just a new hire. They respected her drive, her compassion, and the unique perspective she brought to the table. But despite the growing confidence in her role, Emily still felt the weight of her past lingering, especially when the team discussed the program's goals. She knew how important it was to make a real difference, but doubts crept in. Was she really the right person for this? Could she really lead people, given how far behind she felt in experience? One afternoon, as she was organizing the program's first outreach event, Emily found herself staring out of the window in her office, lost in thought. The city skyline was spread out before her, a stark contrast to the small, dim room she had once called home. She thought back to the first day David had offered her the job, to the kindness he had shown her when no one else would. The voice in her head whispered doubts, telling her that she didn't deserve this life, that she hadn't worked hard enough to earn it. But then, just as quickly, she thought of the people who had helped her, the ones who had seen her when she was invisible, who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. She was not alone. She had people who cared about her, who wanted to see her succeed. That thought gave her the courage to face the next challenge. That evening, Emily stood in front of the team, ready to present the final plan for the outreach event. Her hands trembled slightly as she began speaking, but she found her rhythm as she went on, the passion in her voice carrying her through the nerves. "This program is more than just about giving back," she said, looking around the room at the faces of the people who were now part of her team. "It's about creating a space where people can feel seen, heard, and valued. We're not just offering help, we're offering hope. We're showing them that they matter." The room was quiet for a moment, and then, one by one, the team began to nod, their eyes lighting up with understanding. Emily felt a surge of pride. This was her moment. She wasn't just part of a company anymore. She was part of something bigger, something that could change lives. The event itself was a success beyond her expectations. It was held at a local community center, and the turnout was overwhelming. People from all walks of life came to take part, to learn about the resources available to them, and to connect with others who had faced similar struggles. Emily walked around the center, talking to the attendees, listening to their stories. She saw herself in so many of them, and it filled her heart with hope. She was no longer just the girl who had been living on the streets. She was someone who had the power to help others, to make a real difference. After the event, as she stood outside the center, watching the last of the attendees leave with smiles on their faces, Emily felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had done something that mattered. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like an outsider. She felt like she belonged. That night, as Emily returned to her apartment, she sat on the couch, Max curled up beside her, and reflected on how far she had come. She had been given a second chance, a chance to build a life for herself, to help others, and to truly live. The future no longer seemed uncertain. She knew now that no matter where it led, she was ready to face it, with confidence and courage, because she had found her purpose. And with that, she knew she could do anything. As the weeks passed, Emily began to settle into her new life more and more. The outreach program was thriving, and her confidence continued to grow as she took on more responsibility. She could feel the weight of the past slowly lifting from her shoulders. But even with all the progress, there was still something nagging at her, a lingering sense of uncertainty about the future. She knew she was doing good work, but the doubt still crept in from time to time. One evening, as Emily was walking home from work, she found herself lost in thought, her mind racing with questions. Could she really continue on this path? Was she truly ready to lead this new chapter of her life, or was she just pretending to be someone she wasn't? The sound of Max's paws on the pavement beside her brought her back to the present. The dog had been a constant companion, a source of comfort through every step of her journey. She bent down to pet him, feeling the softness of his fur beneath her fingers. At that moment, she realized something important. She wasn't pretending. This was her life now. She had earned it. The doubts were just a part of the process, and they didn't define her. She was more than her past. She was building something real. As she walked through the door to her apartment, she was greeted by the familiar warmth of the space she had come to call home. The little apartment was a symbol of everything she had achieved. It wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a place where she could finally breathe, where she could build her future. Emily sat on the couch, Max curling up beside her, and pulled out her phone. She had a message from David, asking if she was free to talk. A feeling of warmth spread through her chest as she opened the message. David had been more than just a boss. He had been a mentor, a guide, and a friend. She hadn't realized how much she had come to depend on his support until now. She quickly replied, letting him know she was free to talk. Within moments, her phone buzzed, and David's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, Emily," he said when she answered, his voice warm and friendly. "How's everything going?" "It's going well," Emily replied, smiling as she settled back on the couch. "The program is doing great, and I'm starting to feel more confident every day." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm really proud of you, Emily," David said. "You've come so far." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had been so focused on the work, on moving forward, that she hadn't taken a moment to realize just how far she had come. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't have done it without you." David chuckled softly. "You could have, but I'm glad I was able to be there for you." The conversation shifted, and they began discussing some new ideas for the outreach program. As they talked, Emily's mind cleared. She felt her confidence rising with each word they exchanged. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. The next morning, Emily woke up with a new sense of purpose. She had been given an incredible opportunity, and it was up to her to make the most of it. As she walked to work that day, she felt a quiet sense of pride settle over her. She was no longer the homeless girl with no future. She was Emily, the leader of a successful community program, and she had earned every step of it. When she arrived at work, she was greeted by the team with smiles and excitement. They had been working hard to plan the next big event, and the energy in the office was contagious. Emily sat down at her desk, her mind focused and ready to tackle the challenges ahead. That afternoon, David called her into his office again. As she walked in, she could sense that something was different. David was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. When he turned to face her, there was a gleam in his eyes. "I have something I want to offer you," he said. Emily's heart skipped a beat. Was this it? Was he offering her more responsibility? "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. David smiled and handed her a folder. "I want you to lead the expansion of the outreach program to other cities," he said. "We've seen how successful it's been here, and I think you're the perfect person to take it nationwide." Emily's breath caught in her throat. This was everything she had worked for, everything she had dreamed of. She was about to change even more lives than she had imagined. She looked at David, her heart racing with excitement. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "I'll do it." David smiled, his pride in her evident. "I knew you would." Months passed, and Emily's life continued to transform in ways she had never imagined. The outreach program she had once led locally was now expanding to cities across the country. She had been traveling frequently, meeting new teams, and witnessing firsthand how her work was positively impacting so many lives. The weight of her responsibilities had only grown, but so had her strength. She no longer doubted herself the way she once had. She had proved that she could lead, and the results spoke for themselves. People were finally starting to recognize the true value of the work they were doing. Her mornings now began with early flights, coffee in hand, and a renewed sense of purpose. But despite the whirlwind of success, Emily always made time to reflect on how far she had come. Each new city brought with it new challenges, but the support from her team, and from David, kept her grounded. She had learned to embrace the uncertainty of it all, knowing that her past no longer defined her. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Emily returned to her apartment. Max, her faithful dog, greeted her as he always did, his tail wagging with excitement. She smiled, feeling the familiar comfort of home. As she sat down to relax, she pulled out her phone and noticed a text from David. "I'm so proud of everything you've accomplished. Let's grab dinner when you're back in town. I'll be waiting for you." His words meant more than she could express. David had been the one person who saw potential in her when no one else did. He had given her a chance, not just at a job, but at life. As she reflected on the journey she had taken, Emily realized just how much her world had changed in such a short time. She was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. The girl who had once been invisible, lost in the struggle of day-to-day survival, was now a woman with a purpose, a leader with a voice that carried weight. She had found her place in the world. She had found her calling. And it was all because of one simple act of kindness, saving a dog from the rain. She smiled, knowing that the path she had walked was one that had been built step by step, with each decision leading her closer to the person she was meant to be. The road ahead would be filled with new challenges, but Emily was ready. She was no longer just the girl with a dream. She was the woman living it. And as she looked out of her apartment window at the city lights below, she knew that this was only the beginning of the life she had always deserved.